Hi, hello, and welcome back to Engineering Chaos, a podcast where normally we talk about corporate life, give advice occasionally to those coming up behind us, and lately we're talking a lot about how the political scene and current pop culture is impacting corporate life. And today I was supposed to have my co-host with me, but some scheduling things happened, and that is what it is. So you get me by myself again on a rant, as always. And today we've got to talk about Elon. As an engineer and as a software focused engineer, I feel uniquely qualified to talk about Elon. Even though I've never worked for one of his companies, nor would I ever because of what I have been told by engineering friends of mine, we need to talk about this man. Now, as those who listen loyally know, I am definitely the more centrist person of this podcast. I have both right-leaning views and left-leaning views, and I like to see things from all ends of the spectrum. So I would like to start with that because if you are new here, you might think that I'm judging Elon purely because he is a part of a right-wing agenda, and that is not the case. My judgment of Elon came long before this administration as an engineer. While, yes, the man and his companies, not really the man himself, but the companies themselves have done some good in the world, right? Tesla was one of the forefront leaders in electric vehicles. However, the vehicles have a lot of issues, especially here in Florida with weather and potholes and things like that. However, he also wasn't the originator of that company. He bought into it, and the first Tesla was already in design by engineers and by the people who originally created the company before he was even involved. So there's that. And then there's SpaceX, which I don't know so much of the history, but from my understanding, he also bought into SpaceX. He was not the originator of SpaceX. However, when I look at SpaceX, and I can understand government waste and government inefficiency for a fact, being an engineer that is in a government development world is sometimes inefficient as fuck. However, when it comes to getting rid of all safety regulations in the name of efficiency and ignoring labor regulations for the sake of efficiency, that's when I have issues. Not because I understand people have the right to choose what companies they work for, and a lot of people go into working for Elon because they worship the ground he walks on and they think he's this great, amazing human being for whatever reason. However, the other aspect of Elon's companies, and this is true for Blue Origins with Jeff Bezos as well, they are heavily dependent on H-1B visas. And I am not anti H-1B visa by any stretch of the imagination. I am well aware that the school system here in the US is trash, and we do need the better educated people from other countries to come in and help us. And if they are willing to do that, let them. If they want to immigrate here, I am okay with that. Many would disagree that that's taking American jobs and blah, blah, blah. But the thing is when you use those H-1B visas to threaten people to work obscene hours in order to appease you and keep their jobs, that's where the issue lies. There are tons of talented engineers on both spectrums, right? Both with H-1B visas and without. However, the H-1B visas holders, they lose their ability to be in this country if they lose their job, whereas an American engineer will not. So there is a lot more pressure on the H-1B visa holders to, in fact, work the insane schedules and insane things that Elon requires at his companies in order to say efficient. Right? Ignoring labor laws is not the answer. And for people who say, well, they do it for the overtime, they're not getting paid overtime. They're probably, more than likely, they're all salary workers that have no overtime and they're being forced to work those hours. And from my understanding, knowing people who worked at SpaceX, that was the case. They were sleeping in their cars because there was not enough time for them to go home and even shower to get launches off on time. The timelines were so ridiculous. And you can see this even in some of the requests for comment with things about being fired for sexual harassment or being fired. There was a lawsuit for what is that word? I can't think of it. What is it called when you're fired without cause? I can't think. Anyways, I can't think. My brain just kind of died there for a second. But you can see that, and there was a request for comment related to that lawsuit when a bunch of employees at SpaceX, I believe, sued SpaceX for their wrongful termination. That's the word I was looking for wrongful termination. And they basically said, we can't have this conversation because we have too much to do. And that is how he's running Doge. The expectation of these 19 to 24-year-olds, which I will get into, that is a whole different topic, is I'm pretty sure because Doge doesn't actually exist, they're also volunteers and expected to work these hours, which is insane. If that is the case, they're not getting paid. It's insane what he's requiring them to do, but even more insane if they're doing it on a volunteer basis and aren't actually getting paid. But we'll get to the 19 to 24-year-olds in a second. The culture Elon sets is not a culture to follow into corporate life, and that is my current worry. This man expects 80+ hour weeks from every employee he hires. And if you knew that going in, great, fine, whatever. If you expected maybe in times of crunch time, right, with SpaceX, maybe a launch that you had to do an 80-hour week, but your normal was a regular 40. That is one thing. I have done that plenty at my jobs, where we had a crunch time and I had to put in 60 to 80 hours just to get things out the door on time. And I'm okay with that, as long as the majority of my time is balanced. And I feel, this may not be true, but from speculation and from what I've seen online with people coming out against his companies, that is generally the case, that not only do they not feel supported by their management teams or in their performance, they also were expected to do things that they weren't aware of when they came in to the job. And the culture, right? A lot of people are talking about Elon proposing a 120-hour work week. And when you do the math, that's a little over 17 hours a day, 7 days a week, or 2 hours for 5 days a week, which is what he expects of the 19 to 24-year-old cronies that are working for him in Doge. Now, before I start talking about Doge, I want to make it clear, I am not against rooting out government corruption. If there is corruption, if there is misspending, if there is a proper audit reveals a bunch of bullshit, awesome, we're rooting out, and I don't care what side it came from. I really don't. If they're spending our money in a way that it shouldn't be, and I'm not talking about humanitarian aid, if we don't solve our own issues, right? We're one of the only developed countries in the world that doesn't have, universal health care. So, and that's just one of many things that we should fix at home before sending, and I'm not even saying end all humanitarian aid, right? But maybe we shouldn't be adding extra outside of the current budget to support other wars. I don't know. I don't have the answers. I'm not in politics for a reason. But I can see the argument of humanitarian aid, and I can also see the argument of solving the American people's problems first before we send money elsewhere. Now, a lot of the things that have been said in the press thus far about what Doge is doing have been proven false, right? The condoms for Gaza and things like that. Even Elon himself in the Oval Office, which is a whole different conversation we'll get to too, admitted that he is going to be wrong sometimes. I also don't believe that we should be getting government information via fucking Twitter. Twitter's meant for trolls and fucking porn. Let's be real here. No one is on Twitter to take things seriously, ever. So the fact that we have to get government information is just Elon trying to drive traffic to his own site. And there's a conflict of interest there, right? As an engineer, if you deal in the government world, you know that you can't even interact, like you can't even go to have dinner with a friend who is on the government side if you were on the contractor side, and vice versa. So how is Elon policing his own conflict of interest? Also, why are we taking a bunch of coders? And they're not even trained coders, to be real. If you're 19 years old, you're probably self-taught, and not that self-taught is a bad thing, because I am very much so a self-taught. I went to engineering school, but when it comes to my coding skills, for the most part, I'm self-taught in most languages that I write. However, not self-taught in a government system, maybe we don't want. There is a limit, especially if you're new to the system, and on top of that, not being cleared to the information on that system. I am not okay with kids who haven't had to have their lives looked at and own up to the responsibility of owning or being cleared to a certain level, having access to information that they shouldn't. I think every government employee, I don't think there should be any special treatment when it comes to clearances. And this includes Trump and anyone else in Congress, right or left, if you cannot clear the government security process that the rest of us at the lower levels have to clear, if they would not give you access, right? Elon has been denied in the past and doesn't have access to parts of his own company for SpaceX due to clearance. So if he can't have access to that information at his own company, why is he in the government? And a lot of people have talked about auditors versus programmers and replacing things with AI. I haven't liked Elon before this administration. I think he is a disgrace to engineering, if you will. Not that he hasn't done good things, because I'm willing to admit that he has, right? I grew up in a small town that was dying before SpaceX, and he brought a lot back, bringing space private, if you will, brought a lot back while the government was refusing to fund NASA. Sure. Absolutely. My small town is booming now in some extent. And I don't know if the people that bought houses there really appreciate that, but it is what it is. He brought a lot of business to that small, sleepy town. And it's now actually decent for me to go home because of it. So the man has done the man's business. I wouldn't say Elon himself. The man's business, SpaceX, has done some good things. And I think Starlink is an interesting concept when one person or one company doesn't have unilateral access to shut it off when they feel like it. If no one has control over it, or if one entity, right? If you can't just shut it off because you feel like it, then yeah, it's an awesome concept, bringing Wi-Fi to places that previously didn't have it, because the world kind of runs on the internet. From an engineering perspective, it's kind of cool. But also, similar to, right, the creator of ChatGPT has voiced concerns of releasing it and people who want to do nefarious things with it doing such things, right? We're talking about protections for AI not creating child pornography, and tech in and of itself comes with downsides, and engineering innovation comes with downsides, and that is the thing that I don't trust Elon with. The man lives in the nefarious sides of things, and that is proven by the fact that most of the organizations he's been targeting with Doge are organizations that were actively investigating him. Do we really not see a correlation there? You're getting sued by the Department of Labor. Like when you're being sued 3 ways Sunday by the government, you want to get rid of the people that are causing you a headache, right? There have been many correlations between things that have stopped him from doing business he wants to do and retaliatory methods he's done with Doge, like a toddler. Now, let's talk about the 19 to 24-year-olds, the coders, that I don't like to give the title of engineer to because I think it gives us all a bad name. Not only has it come out that one of them is extremely racist, but also has a past of selling information, because the government is full of bad people, whether it be sexual assaulters, racism, insider trading, right and left. I think they all should go. So the racism thing, well, yes, it's bad. I'm not going to say it's not. It's horrible. But if we're going to fire the kid for that, we should fire the whole rest of the government, right? Even elected officials. I don't think elected officials should be immune to facing the consequences of their own personal actions. If we're gonna fire a 19-year-old for being racist on the internet, we should have never confirmed Pete Hegseth. Two sides of the same fucking coin, realistically. Anyways, the bigger concern, given what they have access, from my opinion as an engineer, right? Bad people do bad things. But if you have a history of selling information and you are now at a level of access, even read-only. You can sell read-only information. I don't believe the read-only story personally, because why would you take a bunch of coders with you if you only had read-only access? And I've also seen stories, while I'm not 100% sure that they are true, I've seen stories where at the beginning, at the Department of Treasury, they didn't have read-only access. They had full write access and were pushing code. And that is scary, given that these engineers are not experienced software engineers, but also none of these people, Elon included, have any idea how to audit spending, especially not the kids, right? I've heard reports, again, these could be false, but I've seen stories and reports that the kids, the 19 to 20-year-olds, are the ones deciding if senior level federal officials get to keep their jobs. And that is insane. One I've also heard is living in a federal building because of the work hours Elon is requiring them to participate in. Insane. I do not care what side of the aisle you were on. No one can police their own conflicts of interest. They just can't. I'm sorry. If you think someone is going to willingly take an unbiased take on their own government contracts, I don't know what to say to you, because that makes you sound like an idiot. Truthfully, it does. And I don't say that as a right versus left thing. I just genuinely, if you think someone can police their own conflict of interest and their own bias and their own benefit, you're crazy. They're going to give themselves whatever they can. They're not going to say, oh, what my company is getting is wasteful spending in the grand scheme of things. And this has nothing to do with Tesla being the named contract in the 2025 budget. Yes, it is a massive conflict of interest, but on zero planets does an electric vehicle belong in combat zones. So why are we acquiring millions of dollars, it might be in the billions, of electric vehicles for the military? Because if you're only sending them to bases, you don't need them. There are plenty of contractors who have done the vehicle thing for very many years, but also, even if you wanted to compete those contracts, electric vehicles are dumb in that environment. Absolutely horrendously dumb. Forgetting all of the issues with things like the Cybertruck, if we're really directly giving money to Elon Musk, if we must. Electric vehicles from an engineering perspective don't belong in combat zones. That they're just, what happens when you just suddenly run out of power? Unless they've magically figured out a way to charge these things via solar while they're driving them in the desert, they don't belong in fucking combat. Why is that a priority item for military spending or government spending as a whole? There are plenty of assets across the military that are just sitting in warehouses. And I'm not saying that, like, cut defense spending entirely, because that's not realistic. We need the military. We need the military to be as strong and ready whenever they are needed, right? We don't want to be caught with our pants down. But I'm saying, maybe don't keep buying things we're never going to use. Maybe don't junk a bunch of vehicles, because they're not going to do anything. They're just not. So, yes, I admitted my bias in this conversation when it comes to talking about Elon. I don't like him. I think he's cocky. And it has nothing to do, before people come in and be like, well, you're hating on an autistic person. Hi, hello, have you met me? I'm not hating on an autistic person. Also, we can behave like autism is a spectrum, and the man is still bad. You can be both at the same time. Autism is not an excuse for poor behavior. Also, you can't have it both ways. You can't say that things like reasonable accommodations in the workplace are unfair to you because you were more qualified, and then also, blame anyone who criticizes Elon because he's autistic or he has Asperger's, which, again, Asperger's is a part of the autism spectrum and has been for a while now. So Asperger's is no longer an official diagnosis, and him continuing to use that is perpetuating. Anyways, let's get to the Oval Office conversation, right? The man broke dress code, which, I mean, what tech bro doesn't? Honestly, it says a lot about how cocky they are, in my opinion, but, like, think Personally speaking, yes, I know it's age-old tradition and people will talk about it's disrespectful. I think dress codes are stupid. I think workplace corporate dress codes, and I've said this on this podcast before, I think workplace dress codes are stupid. If this is how I work when I'm at home and I don't, my productivity, right? Talking about a merit-based society, we want merit out of these people. Not that any of them on paper would be qualified. That doesn't necessarily, right? Anyways, I don't think your clothing says anything about how qualified you are. You can talk about respect all you want. I think the argument about what he wore in the Oval Office is kind of stupid. Yes, you may have an argument about tradition or whatever and how it shows lack of respect and that he doesn't care about Trump or whatever. I think what comes out of the 4-year-old's mouth is more important to listen to because young kids like that don't just say shit they haven't heard before. So telling Trump that he's not the president and he needs to shut his fucking mouth, well, that might be telling to what's happening at home. What is that 4-year-old hearing? But I don't really want to go into like the 4-year-old's behavior because it's a 4-year-old. His dad's the one that's putting him out on the world for the world to see and judge. And I'm not pro family vlogger, and I'm not going to say just because it's Elon Musk that it's okay for him to bring his kid and tout him around. I don't think that's the only kid we ever see in the media. So clearly, of the like 10 others he has, he's not the. It's so funny that two people are supposed to be the face of like family values have multiple wives and multiple kids with multiple wives. And not that that's a bad thing. Plenty of people get divorced and remarried and have kids with plenty of people do it. It's kind of normal nowadays. Should it be normalized? I don't fucking know. I am biased in that situation because I think my parents should have got divorced sooner than they did. So like, I've got a bias if I say, should it be normalized? Yeah, because shit happens. But I think people should put more work into their marriages. I don't know. Who am I to say? I have been married for, 7 years now almost. And it hasn't been easy. So like, that's not the point. Should Elon have been in the Oval Office? I don't know. I don't care about traditions. I really don't. If they're doing their job is what I care about. And Trump and Musk aren't doing a good job, in my opinion. Right? And it's not even about like the political things, right? It's not about the morals. It's not about right versus left. It's not even about up versus down, in my opinion of the world right now. If you can't even write coherent executive orders, why should anyone follow them? And most of them aren't coherent. They're nonsense, rambling bullshit. Right, there was the one about education and transgender youth and how it was talking about like teachers not like the whole teacher surgery thing. Like, what the fuck? How does anyone believe this shit? Right, the whole $60 million or something, 650 million on sushi. Are y'all fucking stupid? Like, how do you fall for that bullshit? Also, can you not fact check? Because that clearly came, like, not only is Elon himself tweeting a bunch of bullshit that everyone falls for, right? The whole FEMA thing is one of those things that he tweeted recently that everyone's currently talking about. That FEMA was sending money to luxury hotels or whatever, and that should have been sent to South Carolina or whatever. It's just, if you can prove it to be false, don't tweet about it. If you're not sure what the facts are, and that's my issue with Doge currently, is A, they're doing everything on Twitter. Why? It's stupid. Government official communications should not be going through fucking Twitter. I don't want to deal with porn bots to get my information, truthfully. Sorry, not sorry. I got off Twitter a long time ago. Around the time I bought it, but that's not the point. Why, even if it were true, part of FEMA's funding is relevant to housing migrants. So asylum seekers, people who are here legally. So saying that it was illegal immigrants that money was going to is false. So you can create a narrative that gets people all riled up with half facts, right? Even if that was the number, it's still not 100% correct. Should we be funding something like that? I don't know. I also live in Florida, who, instead of admitting we have an immigration potential issue, which I don't really think we do, just ship everybody off to New York and make it New York's problem. So red states do have immigration issues, but we just ship them to and maybe human trafficking, to make it the bleeding heart people's problem. And then now RFK has been confirmed, but that's a whole different topic in and of itself. There are good things and bad things depending on what he does. I could see him being moderately benign, and I could also see him being totally destructive. I could also see him doing some good, right? I am all for, again, and I've talked a lot about this recently with like people in my life. The idea is a good one. The execution usually is not, right? Big pharma transparency idea. Informed consent on big pharma with unbiased informed consent being the key word, right? We have seen the reality of doctors being paid off to promote the safety of what's it called? The artificial sweeteners. You can pry those from my cold dead hands, but like I knew that there was a potential. Some of the studies out there about artificial sweeteners probably weren't telling the full story. But I also don't agree with complete holistic everything, right? I think holistic methods, and this is just coming from my personal trainer, right? My nutrition coach, my slightly crunchy version of myself, I think holistic should be the first line of defense, especially with minors. When it comes to things like ADHD and depression and anxiety, and if we have that diagnostic, let's try some of these holistic things first before we jump straight to meds. Will they always work? No, absolutely not. I am one of the ADHDers that I can manage my ADHD through a lot of holistic methods. And I prefer, and I've done both. I've done meds and I've done holistic now. I prefer handling my ADHD holistically. That is a me thing. My husband, on the other side of the spectrum, has more than ADHD and cannot manage without a medication. And it took us a very long time to find the right combination of things for him to function normally. And that's okay. No amount of holistic medicine would have helped him. And that's okay. We don't have to know the answer all the time. But meds are the answer for some people. Holistic methods are the answer for some people. A combination of the two is the answer for some people. Every person is different. So I'm pro informed consent on pharmaceuticals, but I'm not pro removing them from the shelves. If it's been FDA approved and we've seen minimal impacts, I guess minimal is also, it shouldn't be subjective, but it is. Depending on who you talk to, depends on like what side effects are reported and things like that, they consider to be minimal. Some people consider any death from something like mifepristone to be worthy of pulling it off the shelves. And I fear a similar mentality would be used for something like stimulants and SSRIs. I also don't agree, right? You can look at, it's the same thing with Elon, right? We were talking about Elon. I got on a sidetrack because that's another special interest, but it's the same thing with Elon. I can look at Elon's ability to be a special government employee objectively and see if he's actually doing some good. But the problem is he isn't. He's proposing ridiculous shit like 120-hour work weeks and forcing kids who should be enjoying their life outside of work to work those ridiculous hours, presumably unpaid, as unpaid volunteers. Because when they originally put out resumes for Doge, not only did you have to be a verified Twitter person, aka paying Musk, to even apply, it was mentioned that they would be unpaid positions. And to my knowledge, that is still the case for these 19 to 24-year-olds. So they're working 80 plus hours a week, 7 days a week, which is a different problem entirely with them doing things over the weekend when Congress is adjourned and most people, they're leaving them unchecked with no balance at all. That is more my issue. Also, The clearance I have a big issue with because no one else would get away with that. And right, the Oval Office thing, bringing the 4-year-old with him to the Oval Office. If I wasn't aware that if a woman had done the same thing, she would have been ripped to shreds, I wouldn't have an issue with it. Kids should exist in the world. Kids should be with their parents more often than they are currently in this world. But I also understand that this world isn't set up for parents to really be able to do that. And that's why I don't have kids. I am not, again, you can talk respect and tradition and unprofessionalism, but I think that's all a whole bunch of bullshit. I really don't give a shit. I also know that had a woman done the same thing as Musk, even of similar power, brought her kid in with her, the media would have lost its damn mind. But no, they're turning to Vance and Elon being with their kids, presumably for the first time in forever, right? They're using them as photo ops and as props, and I don't love that because there's not a lot of history, especially with Elon. I didn't follow Vance so much before he got on the campaign, so I really don't know much about if he was like out in the community with his kids very often. I don't, presumably the way he said things, it doesn't seem like he was. But the fact that the media is saying things like Musk and Vance are setting the way for like fathers and family, Musk specifically, let's just focus on him because Vance is actually somewhat a stick to what he preaches kind of guy from what I've seen, right? I don't think he has multiple wives. His kids are all with the wife he has. Don't like the guy really much on policy, but he seems to at least not be a hypocrite. Whereas Vance and Trump, who scream about traditional family values, Musk and Trump, Musk has like 10 kids with like 4 different people and was being sued by a flight attendant for sexual harassment or sexual assault. One of the two. Either way, it's bad. So the man is not traditional family values in any way, shape, or form. And again, do what you want in your personal life. I don't really care. But like, it is hypocritical to scream about traditional family values and the media to go, oh, look at Musk being such a great dad, knowing damn well that if a woman had done the same thing, the media would lose its damn mind, but also that he's not that great of a dad. This is the only kid of 10 that we ever see. And again, I don't get too much into celebrity drama, but from my understanding, it's literally just so he can annoy the mom and try to keep him, the 4-year-old, from mom. So while if he is truly, I don't understand how a bunch of young coders are really rooting out government wasteful spending, because everything I've heard that Doge has come up with is either satire, wrong, or a bunch of nonsense that nobody understands. So I also refuse to get on Twitter, so there's that. I don't see Elon is a problem. Elon is a problem to engineers. Elon is a problem to corporate life. Elon is a problem to our government. Elon is a problem to his own companies. I don't agree with him being able to self-police because no one really truly can do that. The executive orders are getting out of hand a lot. Not saying that past presidents haven't done it, but these ones are insane and they keep coming. You would think that was like a first week thing, but no, if someone does something to piss this administration off with your head. Here's an executive order to say you can't do that. As someone said, it reminds them of the education decrees from Umbridge and Harry Potter, and I kind of agree. And with every new executive order, it sounds like Project 2025 enacting itself and no one's stopping anything. And I'm not saying that there really is good methods to stopping, especially with majorities in the House and the Senate, but at some point we've got to do something. And I say we as a collective, left, right, whoever you are, you have to come to an understanding that some of us aren't anti transparency. It's anti the execution. And I understand when it comes to like reduction in force in the government. Again, it's the execution. It's how they're going about it with the false promises to take deferred resignations that they had no grounds to stand on to even offer that. It's millions of federal workers getting asked to leave and adding to the unemployment bucket. Because Musk says so, it's the using personal drives to access our information. Because anyone who's worked in any sort of secured space, if you will, knows using personal drives on government anything is a huge, that is a surefire way to get fired, especially in classified spaces. So why are we allowing 19 to 24-year-olds to run around and do it? Because Musk said so? Who, and again, you don't have to elect someone for them to be efficient. No, anyone who voted for Trump knew Musk kind of came with him. That's fine. But I'm not even anti-special government employees but if they're not qualified for the job that they're supposedly doing, why are they doing it? Musk has zero qualifications to be recommending anything at a government level. And as an immigrant, I'm not even really sure he should be. Not because he's an immigrant, but because of the rules we have lined out about non-citizen or non-US born people. Should he be that close to the president, knowing he's not cleared to be there? And trying to replace everything with AI. They want to add jobs to the field, but then also add AI to everything for student loans. I don't understand how Doge, and it's not because I'm stupid, and it's not because I hate Elon, right? I will give credit where credit is due. I think Elon's a piece of shit, and I have long before, and I'm not just hopping on the liberal leftist train. There is a literal episode on this podcast of me talking shit on Elon before this administration even took hold. I think Elon is a bad representation for corporate futures. We're talking about 120-hour work weeks, but the reality is no one's going to be expected to work 120 hours. You just won't be full-time anymore. You won't get your benefits. You definitely won't get overtime because that's literally impossible. If that were to be enacted, I'm not even saying it would be that easy to do something like that. But if the Fair Labor Standards Act, I think, is what would cover that. If that changed to change the standard work week for a full-timer to be considered even 80 plus hours a week, double what we have now, right? 120 is extreme. To not have weekends, to not have time really outside of work because they're anti-remote work. So you've got a commute on top of a 17-hour day. That's insane. And I understand a lot of medical professionals and things like that do hours like that, but they also get, when they do something like that, they get 3 or 4 days off after. They do have caps for how often they can work in most hospital systems, because it's unsafe for them to continuously work past a certain time. Even when my mom worked fire rescue, there was a cap on how long she could be mandatoried as a single shift, but without having at least 24 hours off in between, which 24 is not enough after working 72, in my opinion, but that's for a safety factor. Imagine if the person who's working on the line hasn't slept in 48 hours. How many mistakes are you going to have to pay for because of that? And yeah, you could replace them with robots and all of those things, but someone's going to foot the bill for those things. And not all things do robots and AI have the capability to. Sometimes you just need hand skills. You need skills. It's not something you can teach a robot to do because it's so particular and meticulous. And I mean, the idea is you don't design things like that require a lot of hands-on touch time, but sometimes you just gotta as an engineer. So some old designs, some old production lines that didn't have a lot of the regulations we have on design constraints and things like that now. I think Elon is dangerous to the corporate world as it extends right now. I don't think Doge is worth what they are being paid, if they're being paid at all. I don't understand how a bunch of coders, I am a coder and I wouldn't be able to audit. I can wrap my head around man hours for a project when it comes to engineering, but I'm not going to tell someone in education how to budget their job. I don't know what it takes to do lesson plans and what a teacher needs in her room every year. Not saying that that's what the Department of Education actually does, but like, I'm not going to tell someone outside my field how to manage their own budget. I'm not going to tell a program manager how to manage their own budget, or even mechanical how to manage their budget. That's why each individual engineering lead, even in engineering, has its own account manager, usually, when it comes to budgets and how to best create the project on whatever funding you have. So while I agree with pulling all of the departments together and figuring out a way to bring down our national debt, however, we have to do that. A, it's not going to be an overnight solution. B, Musk and his cronies are not the way to do it. And C, why are there no people who actually, can do accounting and find actual solutions involved in this process? AI is not the answer to everything, and that's coming from a tech person who thinks a lot of this stuff is very interesting and has been at the forefront of AI and VR for a long time now. It has its place, but it is not the answer to everything, especially if it's not trained. And if they want to use AI in the government, what are they training it on? It's your own data. And it's just, Elon is a problem, and that is not because I am a leftist. That is, or a liberal, whatever. They are different. I don't quite understand which ones. Anyways, Elon is a problem, and he has always been a problem, even prior to government. He's now trying to buy open AI. He's trying to it's a similar thing with Trump and fucking Greenland. It's not for sale. Just walk away. You're not getting it. But the difference is, Trump and Greenland, we have a military. Buying companies is not the same as buying countries. People who voted for Trump voted to get us out of wars, but it seems like this man wants to start at least 2 new ones with allies. Elon is not doing what people think he is. He is not saving the country. And this is coming from someone who is pro transparency. I am okay, left, right, whoever put in policies, if they're stupid spending money and there is proof that this aid is not used, right? Because yes, USAID has its bad components, but it also did good things. So completely getting rid of it isn't the answer either. It's Department of Education. I am sure there are bad spending deals and contracts inside the Department of Education. But if we want to talk about sending curriculum back to the states, well, that's already a thing. And states like Florida have been at the bottom half for many, many years. I grew up in the Florida school system, and nothing about our curriculum is worth a shit, and ever has been, right? You had FCAT, and then you had Common Core. Elon's not going to solve those problems by cutting budget. That is still going to be a problem. We're still going to be at the bottom of education, regardless of if the Department of Education exists. You're just going to further harm the people that do utilize some of the good things of the Department of Education. I don't know what else is the credit bureau, the one that protects us from the banks. Awesome. Now you want them to charge us out the ass if we mess up and we accidentally overdraft, and there's no cap on credit card interest rates and everything. Are you kidding me? You don't want regulations on the people that handle your money. Oh, wait. Because you have so much money, it doesn't matter. And I say this as most of these things don't impact me. I don't have kids in school. Really, the only thing that impacts me that Elon has said out of his dumb, stupid mouth is the 120-hour work week. And I don't think that one's even realistic. That's just Elon being Elon. He has never been afraid to talk about how his working conditions at his companies are horrible. People voted for Trump for no tax on overtime, but the thing is there's not going to be overtime. And a lot of people said that. And that is outlined in Project 2025 that they wanted to change. And now I kind of want to go back and read these sections because I did read them, but it's been a while. They did talk about all of this. And I wanted to believe that it was just fear-mongering, and that's not the outline for their administration, but I still informed myself with what might be. I didn't believe a lot of it would happen as quick as it did. Not that I supported any of it, but I genuinely thought there would be a bigger struggle to implement some of the things that are going on right now. Not that I didn't believe that they were capable of it, because I absolutely did. But Elon is a problem. Elon is a problem to the corporate life we know today. Because if he is setting that standard at the government level, that trickles down to the rest of us. DEI. Private businesses aren't required to conform to the DEI, but most followed suit, even though they weren't required. And most people who work at those companies were, in fact, upset with their company for following suit. And at most companies, you have a wide variety of people when it comes to political status. So while, again, execution of DEI might have gotten a little wild at some companies, it still was helpful in some areas for some people, even if it's something as simple as a resource group where you can connect with other people just like you and feel out how bad things might be, or feel out if maybe a situation is more than what you think it is. Just connecting with other people who are like you isn't a bad thing. However, those groups are now going away at a lot of companies because of this DEI initiative. And I talked about in a previous episode when it comes to like the removal of SWE on college campuses because it supports gender specific recruitment. We need more women in STEM. We need to focus on bringing more women to STEM and telling them that it's not so scary. Honestly, I wouldn't recruit. While I say that, I wouldn't recruit women to STEM because we have people like Elon running companies in STEM. I wouldn't. I just wouldn't. So, Elon, if they truly root out all the corruption and find a way without giving tax breaks to themselves, which they will, and they are, because I don't know how to solve the tax problem either, but like a universal tax rate doesn't sound right either. Equality versus equity, I think a lot of people... I had this conversation recently with someone in my family. What has been spun as the definition of equality is actually equitability. They think, oh, everyone's on an equal playing field. That's what accommodation... No! Accommodations allow... That's equitable. That is not equal. And a lot of people just don't understand the definition because of the way it was executed. And that's a leftist thing. They executed that shit wrong. The ideas, right? I don't care what you do. I genuinely don't care who you are, what you do. If you want to wear a dress in public, I mean, some people will judge and you have to be okay with that. But I don't care. And that's how I feel. I don't know. That has nothing to do with Elon. I'm not going to go into that topic. But Elon is a problem. I mean, it kind of does have something to do with Elon because he does have a trans kid that he disowned. Anyways, Elon is a problem to the corporate force as we know it. And it's not just because of funding and what he's supposedly doing with Doge. And it's not just because he's more efficient in private sector businesses and government entities like NASA will never be able to compete. That's not why he's a problem to the corporate world as we know it. He is setting an example that I was afraid of from the time he started showing up in government conversations, that we should all just be slaves to our jobs and never have any work-life balance ever. And he's also setting the precedent that benefits and such are not important. He claims to be, he's also a hypocrite. He claims to be about family values and everyone's praising him for, you know, working with his kid, but he has 9 other kids or something like that. I don't know the actual number. He is perpetuating that the only way to be efficient is working obscene hours, and that's not true. He's also perpetuating that remote work is unfair to the people that can't work their jobs remotely. Well, why does that matter? You chose your career. And I've told that to my husband complains about me working remote and how my job means less. And I have literally turned around and said, like, you chose and you have said you don't work well from home anyway. That is you. You, yourself, and you. My personal structure has nothing to do with you. And it's the same thing with the clothes and stuff like that. I'm not going to get after Elon for wearing a ball cap and a t-shirt in the Oval Office because I don't care about traditions. If he was actually doing a good job, I really don't give 2 shits. But he's not. And like the stuttering and things like that, some people just aren't good public speakers. But I also don't think his stuttering has anything to do with him being autistic. I think it has everything to do with him being on a whole lot of a certain drug that starts with K that some secret Mormon wives have talked about. And that's speculation. That's not a fact, but it can be said that might have something to do with the way he communicates. But also, I don't communicate perfectly, so I can understand the stuttering. It is hard to listen to, for sure. But again, if he was doing his job and actually saying something valuable, it wouldn't matter. To me, and to a lot of people who are criticizing him, I don't think. I think the issue is he's being left unchecked, and he is a tick on the future of corporate life, sucking the lifeblood out of us all. Starts with DEI and then goes to the 120-hour work weeks, and then we lose all of our benefits, so then we no longer have healthcare because we can't support 120-hour work weeks. That's just physically impossible. It's one thing when you choose to work for his companies, another when he is setting the standard at a government level. He is a problem, and that's not because of the fake government entity he works for. The fact that he is running around unchecked in some of the things that they're allowing him to do and his cronies to do is the issue. If they were finding real government corruption, I still couldn't overlook the fact that they are not cleared to even be in a lot of the systems that they are. Because I think it's unfair and sets a whole different standard for those of us that do hold security clearances, that our clearances don't matter. And maybe we're going to start seeing a whole lot more of selling secrets. That's just speculation, but it could be a thing, right? When the government themselves are saying they don't care about making sure that their employees are cleared to access the information they're accessing, then why should we? Why shouldn't we just let the janitor see all of the things that we're doing that doesn't have a need to know, you know? Elon's a problem. And that's all I'm going to say. I've been ranting for about an hour on this man and a few other things in this politics, but Elon is a problem. And if you don't see that and you work in corporate life, hope you're right and that he is just a benign nuisance to the engineers of the world. And I hope that he does find some real shit and does some real good in the government, but I don't have much faith in that, truthfully. I genuinely do hope he is just a benign nuisance. That doesn't seem to be the case. And that's as about unbiased of opinion as I can get, because I hate the man. I think, and it's not because he's like rich or anything like that. It's because he's projecting a bad image for engineers and the expectations of them in the workforce. He's teaching a lot of bad habits to a lot of junior engineers, in my opinion, that they don't matter, that they are nothing more than the numbers that they put up. And that's not a way to live, especially if you enjoy being an engineer. Just being put in the corner to make deadlines and not actually innovating is not good. Also, just being taught to ignore regulations and ignore safety testing and ignore safety related design is not good at all. But that's further into detail than I care to get when it comes to Elon and his companies, the way he treats engineers. Forgetting the whole debacle when it came to the Twitter buyout, but that is what it is. He is a danger to us all, and I would keep your eyes out if you work in the corporate world right now, because Elon could make the world an even worse place than it already is for the rest of us very quickly. You may also be pro-transparency just like myself and not see the issues with Elon. However, that is, I guess, your opinion or your viewpoint, if you will, but he is a problem. And he will be until someone decides to put him somewhat in check and give him some actual consequences for the things that he's doing. Because the man also doxed a judge's daughter, which is, and if anyone else in the world that works with judges had doxed a judge's family member, they'd be in jail almost immediately. Allowing this man to continue to run completely unchecked and do whatever the fuck he wants because he's a billionaire is not okay. And I don't agree with that. Even if he manages to do something good. But that is all for this week. I will have some episodes with her back out next week. And hopefully we'll be able to keep up with everything now that I've kind of created a backlog of solo episodes by myself to keep the ones with her together. But yeah, if you want to go out and find me, feel free to follow me at It's Coach Casey on just about everything. And we shall continue to see how all of this unfolds, but hopefully talk about something different that's not politics related in the future. So as always, we appreciate you being here, and I hope you enjoyed the chaos. And the corporate world is changing every day. So let's see how it changes with us.